Donald Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden.
Good evening. We are starting tonight's debate, and I am taking a moment to make sure that I can get the links out to anybody who's watching at home. And so we're going to take a minute to do that. Meantime, I'll let you go ahead and listen to the announcers in the background while we figure out the tech issues.
Good evening from the Health Education Campus of Case Western Reserve University and the Cleveland Clinic. I'm Chris Wallace of Fox News, and I welcome you to the first of the 2020 presidential debates between President Donald J. Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden. This debate is sponsored by the Commission on Presidential Debates. The commission has designed the format, 6 roughly 15-minute segments, with 2-minute answers from each candidate to the first question, then open discussion for the rest of each segment. Both campaigns have agreed to these rules. For the record, I decided the topics and the questions in each topic. I can assure you, none of the questions has been shared with the commission or the two candidates. This debate is being conducted under health and safety protocols designed by the Cleveland Clinic, which is serving as the health security advisor to the commission for all 4 debates. As a precaution, both campaigns have agreed the candidates will not shake hands at the beginning of tonight's debate. The audience here in the hall has promised to remain silent. No cheers, no boos or other interruptions, so we, and more importantly you, can focus on what the candidates have to say. No noise except right now, as we welcome the Republican nominee, President Trump, and the Democratic nominee, Vice President Biden.
And your independent candidate, Joe McHugh. You might notice how I got out here much faster than my 2 opponents.
Gentlemen, a lot of people have been waiting for this night, so let's get going. Our first subject is the Supreme Court. President Trump, you nominated Amy Coney Barrett over the weekend to succeed the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the court. You say the Constitution is clear about your obligation and the Senate's to consider a nominee to the court. Vice President Biden, you say that this is an effort by the president and Republicans to jam through an appointment and what you call an abuse of power. My first question to both of you tonight, why are you right in the argument you make and your opponent wrong? And where do you think a Justice Barrett would take the court? President Trump, in this first segment, you go first, 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chris. I will tell you very simply, we won the election. Elections have consequences. We have the Senate, we have the White House, and we have a phenomenal nominee, respected by all, top academic, good in every way. In fact, some of her biggest endorsers are very liberal people from Notre Dame and other places. So I think she's going to be fantastic. We have plenty of time. Even if we did it after the election itself. I have a lot of time after the election, as you know. So I think that she will be outstanding. She's going to be as good as anybody that has served on that court. We really feel that. We have a professor at Notre Dame, highly respected by all, said she's the single greatest student he's ever had. He's been a professor for a long time at a great school. And we won the election, and therefore we have the right to choose her. And very few people knowingly would say otherwise. And by the way, the Democrats, they wouldn't even think about not doing it. If they had, the only difference is they're trying to do it faster. There's no way they would give it up. They had Merrick Garland, but the problem is they didn't have the election, so they were stopped. And probably that would happen in reverse also, definitely would happen in reverse. So we won the election, and we have the right to do it, Chris.
President Trump, thank you. Same question to you, Vice President Biden. You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you.
First of all,
From 1787 through 1991, for a period of 203 years, only 3 Supreme Court justices were appointed with fewer than 2/3 of the Senate vote. Starting in 1991 through potentially this year, there have been 4 Supreme Court nominees confirmed by the former Grand Old Party, now hijacked, gutted old party, and this would potentially be the 5th. Now, these are justices that could not garner a 2/3 Senate vote, and therefore they may be they are inclined to vote with the deep state and the hijacked two-party system. Now, as far as the nominee Amy Coney Barrett, my primary concern is that she is good. It's good that she's opposed to qualified immunity. However, it's important to recognize that qualified immunity did not start with the courts, and it will not end with the courts. And if we have the Supreme Court justice and a team of justices who decide that they're going to attempt to end qualified immunity from an activist bench, that is problematic, because that could mean that they would depart from precedent, and that means we'd have a court that would go off and do whatever they want, working for you-knows-who, the Federal Reserve. The bottom line is whoever has the money makes the rules, and we need to get back to a free, clean, green, free America. And the best way to do that is to return to precedent with a 2/3 Senate majority confirmation vote. And if Amy Coney Barrett can garner a 2/3 vote, then she would have my support. But it remains to be seen if that will happen.
And that ended when we, in fact, passed the Affordable Care Act. And there's 100 million people who have pre-existing conditions, and they'll be taken away as well. Those pre-existing conditions, the insurance companies are going to love this. And so it's just not appropriate to do this before this election. If he wins.
The other thing is that Senator McConnell in 2016 made the argument that the people should have a right to have a voice in the choice of the nominee. And, it's important to recognize that the Republican Party has become the do as I say, not as I do party. And any president is responsible and accountable for everything that happens and fails to happen under his or her charge. And we really need a president whose words can be trusted. And we don't have that right now.
So we have the Senate, we have a president
Elected to the next.
during that period of time, we have an opening. I'm not elected for 3 years, I'm elected for 4 years. And the 100 million people, Joe, the 100 million people is totally wrong. I don't know where you got that number. The bigger problem that you have is that you're going to extinguish 180 million people with their private health care, that they're very
That's
happy.
simply not true.
Well, you said.
We're talking about the Supreme Court, and already President Trump is trying to distract and derail the conversation and take it away from the topic at hand. Surprise, surprise. When you have nothing in your favor, you end up doing whatever you can to hijack the conversation, just as they've hijacked the country.
And one of the big debates we had with 23 of my colleagues trying to win the nomination that I won were saying that Biden wanted to allow people to have private insurance still. They can. They do. They will under my proposal.
It's not what you said, and it's not what the party has said.
That is simply
Party doesn't say.
And the irony here is that Vice President Biden took the bait, and we're now talking about health care instead of talking about the Supreme Court.
I am the Democratic Party right now. The platform of the Democratic Party is what I, in fact, approved of. Now, here's the deal. The deal is that it's going to wipe out pre-existing conditions. And by the way, the 200,000 people that have died on his watch, how many of those have survived? Well, there's 7 million people that contracted COVID. What does it mean for them going forward if you strike down the Affordable Care Act?
Joe, you've had 308,000 military people dying because you couldn't provide them proper health care in the military. So don't tell me
I'm
about
happy
this.
to talk about.
And if you were here, it would be 200, it would be 2 million people because you were very late in the draw.
Again, we're seeing the conversation be derailed quite a bit. For those of you who are watching at home that may be playing drinking games, all right, here's the deal. Joe Biden already went for one of them.
We're going to talk about COVID in the next segment, but go ahead.
Let me finish. The point is that the president also is opposed to Roe v. Wade. That's on the ballot as well in the
Yeah.
court.
All of this is on the ballot. What's really on the ballot is liberty, and the two gentlemen standing behind me represent two heads of the same party, and they're both managed by the Federal Reserve and the CIA. And if we are going to renew America and restore liberty in America, we must first start by ending the Fed and repealing and replacing it with a credit union, clean, green, citizen-owned, and fully transparent credit union, so that we can get off of oil and out of oil wars, invest in renewables and organics, and split the profits with the people instead of with the bankers. And then we'll have our own government back.
The Supreme Court will hear a case a week after the election in which the Trump administration, along with 18 state attorneys general, are seeking to overturn
That's right.
Obamacare, to end Obamacare. You have spent the last...
Because they want to give good health care.
If I may ask my question, sir.
Good health care.
Over the last 4 years, you have promised to repeal and replace Obamacare, but you have never in these 4 years come up with a plan, a comprehensive plan to replace Obamacare.
Of course they have.
Well, I'll get rid of the individual.
Okay, so now we're talking about healthcare officially, and President Trump is trying to say that he had done something with healthcare. Now, the fact is that as soon as he got elected to office, with the largest GOP majority since 1913, since 1920 rather, he did not do anything for liberty. He did not end the Fed. He did not repeal the CIA. He did not do anything on healthcare. He attempted to do something on healthcare, and the Republican Party could not get it done. That is why nothing was done. All they did was repeal the mandate, which I agree was an unconstitutional mandate. And there's much that we can do to improve healthcare to make sure that it's available for everyone by improving transparency and making it affordable for all people.
You, not him, but that's okay. I'm not surprised. Let me just tell you something. There's nothing symbolic. I'm cutting drug prices. I'm going with favored nations, which no president has.
He's not doing any of this stuff. This is he's using an executive order, which is totally toothless, and it's not going into effect. The only way to really reduce drug prices is to increase transparency and allow competition, to remove the barriers to competition, and also remove the monopolies that the drugs have on the United States and our inability to purchase drugs from overseas in Canada and Mexico. Most of our drugs are actually produced in Mexico as well, and Puerto Rico. So we should do much more to improve transparency and cause competition. The president's lying through his teeth right here.
I'm about to pick up on one of your points to ask the vice president, which is he points out that he would like to add a public option to Obamacare, and the argument that he makes and other Republicans make is that is going to end private insurance. And well, I'm asking the question. It will end. It will end private insurance and create a government takeover of health care.
It does not. It's only for those people who are so poor they qualify for Medicaid. They can get that free in most states, except governors who want to deny people who are poor Medicaid. Anyone who qualifies for Medicaid would automatically be enrolled in the public option. The vast majority of the American people would still not be in that option. Number one.
As long as the rules are clear, objective, and easily understood, we don't have anything to worry about. However, when the rules are hidden behind classification and when we don't understand how the rules work for healthcare, then it's real easy to believe one person or the other and really not know who to trust. What we really need to do is to simplify all the laws on the books so that they're easily understood by the average American, as was required in 1926 with the void for vagueness doctrine. And then doing so, we will ensure that all people are covered over $4,000 a year. And then anything below that, we would receive a dividend under my plan as part of transitioning the Federal Reserve from a bank into a credit union by not splitting the profits with the banks and instead giving it to the people. The American people would receive, on average, about $4,000 per year from age of birth all the way up until we die. And that's going to vary depending on profitability. But that is key because that money will be used as cash payment in the medical industry, and that'll drive down costs, improve competition, and also make it much more available to a lot more people. And that is what we need to do. And to be clear, it's a combination of private sector competition as well as providing a coverage for the people that are not able to afford it, but also making sure that it's in line, so in line with competition. So there's a way that we can align it, and maybe it's just subsidizing individuals so that they can choose which plan they want instead of offering a public option. But that's something that we need to look at.
Take it away. I want to give
Number three, healthcare at a much lower price. Because
He doesn't know how to do that.
fixed it. He has never offered a fix it to
What VP Biden is saying about Trump is true. He doesn't know how. He knows how to talk. He knows how to sell. He's a master inside politician, but he doesn't know policy. And if he did, he would have done something in his first 4 years instead of talking about yesteryear's technology with a steel wall, which people can just climb right over or dig underneath.
Listen, this is the way it is. And that destroyed, that, they shouldn't even call it Obamacare. Then I had a choice to make. Do I let my people run it really well or badly? If I run it badly, they'll probably blame him. But
We definitely don't want Trump's people running it because every single one of them has ended up in
I
jail.
had a meeting with them. They said the problem is no matter how well you run Obamacare, it's a disaster. It's too expensive. Premiums are too high. That it doesn't work. So we do want to get rid of it. Chris, we want to get rid of it.
I understand it, but I have to give you roughly equal time. Please let the vice president talk.
He has no plan for health care.
He hasn't had a plan since he's been elected. That's the reason why. It's the reason why the two-party system decided to give the Democrats a majority in the 2018. Hopefully, with the Democrats, they were thinking might be able to present a healthcare option and they can get something done together, but they weren't able to do that.
He doesn't have a plan. And the fact is, this man doesn't know what he's talking about.
I have one final question for you, Mr. Vice
That's
President.
right.
If Senate Republicans, we were talking originally about the Supreme Court here. If
Yes.
Senate Republicans go ahead and confirm Justice Barrett, there has been talk about ending the filibuster or even packing the court, adding to the 9 justices there. You call this a distraction by the president, but in fact, it wasn't brought up by the president. It was brought up by some of your Democratic colleagues in the Congress. So my question to you is, you have refused in the past to talk about it. Are you willing to tell the American people tonight whether or not you will support either ending the filibuster or packing the court?
Whatever position I take in that, that'll become the issue. The issue is the American people should speak. You should.
The American people should speak. I do not support ending the filibuster. I do not support packing the court. What I do support is recalling and either reconfirming or replacing any justice who has failed to garner the requisite 200-year precedent of 2/3 Senate majority. And if we pass yet another, a 5th justice by the GOP with less than 2/3, with less than a 3/5 Senate majority, again, these are all justices that have been appointed prior to and after, just prior to and just after the Patriot Act. They are inclined to rule in favor of the deep state, not in favor of liberty for America.
Let's try to be serious about it. We have had more than 7 million cases of coronavirus in the United States, and more than 200,000 people have died. Even after we produce a vaccine, experts say that it could be months or even years before we come back to anything approaching normal. My question for both of you is, based on what you have said and done so far and what you have said you would do starting in 2021, why should the American people trust you more than your opponent to deal with this public health crisis going forward? In this case, the question goes to you first, sir. 2 minutes uninterrupted.
So we'll first start off with both of my opponents. Now, the president got rid of the pandemic response team in 2018, and that is the reason why we are in this predicament that we are today. That's the most important thing to remember. Now, the way it's been handled at the federal level as well as on the state level has not been good. First and foremost, shutting down the economy is unconstitutional. Mandating wearing masks is unconstitutional. And under a McHugh administration, we would not have to deal with either one of those things. Moreover, now, a virus is something that is going to be localized in certain areas and not existent in others. That's why local control is absolutely imperative in this situation. And by ending the Fed and going green instead, we will enable those certain areas that are suffering badly to implement an eviction moratorium so that we can protect the people who have been hurt the worst. The key here, the president likes to talk about making America great again. What's important to remember is that the greatness of a nation is measured by how we treat the weakest members of society within it. Okay, so When people are on the streets and are exposed, when people are kicked out of their apartments and all of a sudden have to figure things out on the fly when they no longer have a job, no longer have a way to earn any money, and now are suddenly exposed to a virus, that's not the way to handle things. That's not what we can do. That's not the right way to handle it. But the real problem here is, as long as we have a Federal Reserve, we have no ability to stop payments whatsoever. And that is why it's so important that we end the Fed, go green instead, and replace it with a credit union so that it's clean, green, fully transparent, and citizen-owned. So we once again have the authority and the power to handle natural disasters such as the coronavirus and anything else that comes our way, the way that makes sense for us as people instead of for them as the bankers.
And fund what needs to be done now to save lives.
So if we would have listened to
You
you,
have 2 minutes, sir.
if we would have listened to you, the country would have been left wide open. Millions of people would have died, not 200,000, and one person is too much. It's China's fault. It should have never happened. They stopped it.
He's always pointing the finger at somebody else.
And by the way, when you talked about numbers, you don't know how many people died in China. You don't know how many.
We don't know how many people died in the United States either. As a matter of fact, we don't even know how many people are unemployed. Why? Because none of that information is transparent to the American people. The government controls all of it. What we really need to do is have an open source government that is declassified so that the American people know exactly what's going on, so that we are empowered with the same information as our elected officials, and so that with good information, we can make good decisions. But under either of these candidates, none of that is going to happen. And that is why it's so important that if you're in Colorado or Utah, if you cast a vote for Joe McHugh and we win either Colorado or Utah, we will finish third place in the Electoral College voting and give the Congress the opportunity to escape their entrapment by voting for one of the top three, the president, the vice president, or yours truly, Joe McHugh.
We made the ventilators. You wouldn't have made ventilators, and now we're weeks away from a
Meanwhile, we have two people talking about ventilators. Ventilators are late stage recovery effort, 50% chance of dying. What we really need to do is focus on clean air, fresh water, and healthy organic food. And that is, by the way, liberty. And so that we can stay healthy and instead of getting sick in the first place. The best way to stay healthy is to strengthen our immune systems, not to rely on the government to take care of us. But we also have a government to help when it's needed, and we need to do a better job of that too.
H1N1, you were a disaster. Your own chief of staff said you were a disaster.
14,000 people died, not 200,000. There was no economic recession.
The real question here is, that neither one of these candidates is addressing is the fact that the government did create the coronavirus. It's on the NIH website. We have a stage 5 facility in Wuhan, whatever part of Wuhan, China. And that there are numerous smoking guns that show that this has been planned for a long time. Again, this is what the deep state does. They plan decades in advance. They control both of the parties. They control, as a matter of fact, all the parties so that they can control the vote and limit who we have to choose from as the American people. Now, by sleeping in the car and camping out and driving Postmates at night in order to pay for gas money and groceries, I was able to get on the ballot in Colorado and Utah, and we have the opportunity to end the Fed and go green instead to restore liberty in America.
We're for a vaccine, but I don't trust him at all, nor do you. I know you don't.
We definitely don't trust Trump. And we don't. And you know what? If we have to choose between either one of them, I'd choose Vice President Biden. But you know what? It's like it's lesser of two evils. It's not a way to run a country.
You have repeatedly either contradicted or been at odds with some of your government's own top scientists. The week before last, the head of the Centers for Disease Control, Dr. Redfield, said it would be summer before the vaccine would become generally available to the public. You said that he was confused and mistaken. Those were your two words. But Dr. Slaoui, the head of your Operation Warp Speed, has said exactly the same thing. Are they both wrong?
Well, I've spoken to the companies and we can have it a lot sooner. It's a very political thing because people like this would rather make it political than save lives. It is a very political thing.
The president wants to talk about saving lives when he's the one that shut down the pandemic response team. As a leader, we're responsible for preparing for what might go wrong, planning for that. And a lot of people think that President Trump is fighting the inside. He's not. He's part of it.
It could be there, but it could also also be much. I had him in my office 2 days ago.
He talked about the summer, sir, before it's generally available.
As we said, it's a possibility that we'll have the answer before November 1st. It could also be after.
You know what's ironic here is that the president, actually, it's not ironic at all. America is supposed to be the land of the free and the home of the brave. And that means that we're also supposed to have a vibrant free market. And here's where the irony is, that the Republican Party likes to champion free market ideals. And yet President Trump has taken a very centralized command and control approach to this, and making sure that the way he's working with the pharmaceutical companies, that things are classified, they're not sharing the information with other countries. These are countries that also could benefit from a vaccine. The better approach here would be to open source and declassify all research associated with vaccine development, so that the people of America and around the world would equally benefit in that. Because you know what? If someone gets sick over in China or Japan or Spain or South America, and they come to America, we could get sick here too. The right approach is not to build walls and shut down the economy and turn America into a fortress, but to share our knowledge and to work with other countries around the world so that they share their knowledge with us. And together, as an interdependent community, we will become stronger, healthier, wealthier, and a lot freer.
Reluctant to take it. Are you and your running mate, Senator Harris, contributing to that fear?
No more than the question you just asked him. You pointed out. He puts pressure and disagrees with his own scientists.
But you're saying you can't, Senator Harris is saying you can't trust the scientists.
Well, no, you can trust the scientists. She didn't say that. You can't
Yeah,
trust
she said the public health experts, quote, will be muzzled, will be
Yes.
suppressed.
Well, that's what he's going to try to do. But there's millions of scientists, there's thousands of scientists out there, like here at this great hospital, that don't work for him.
The universities are
That's not.
supposed to be free to do their own research. A better approach than working with certain just pharmaceutical companies, which is very corporatist, very fascist approach, by the way. It would be to make sure that every university in America and even around the world, as well as the pharmaceutical companies, all have access to the virus, so that they can independently conduct their own trials and conduct their own research. And then as a group, different organizations can come to market with approaches to solving the problem. And then the individual will be free to make the decision about whether or not they want to take a vaccine, or if they want to wear a mask, or if they want to socially distance, or maybe they just wanted to take vitamin C. We don't know what the right answer would be, because the process has been controlled centrally, planned and controlled by communist Trump.
Either the lowest or almost the lowest in your class. Don't ever use the word smart with me. Don't ever use
Fascist Trump, communist Trump. There are a lot of words for this guy. I'm just trying to be nice.
47 years you've done this. And if you would have had, let me just tell you something, Joe. If you would have had the charge of what I was put through, I had to close the greatest economy in the history of our country. And by the way, now it's being built again.
What he's not telling you is that the plan all along was to close the economy, the greatest economy in the history of the country, because they wanted to decouple the American and the Chinese economies in order to eventually, after crashing the rest of the world, also crash America and crash our dollar, so we can transition to Bitcoin, which, by the way, is another Federal Reserve project. Neither of these candidates, I'm not so sure that they really understand how that stuff works. But I've written an article on this. Bitcoin is a government project. The Federal Reserve holds 99% of the float, and the objective was to use the virus in order to crash the economy and move the world onto a single uniform currency, and with something that's entirely controlled by a bank instead of in an open source manner by a credit union. We would have no authority and no power over the government or over our own future, because the government would be owned by this private bank, the Federal Reserve, as it is today, and they would be able to continue to call the shots. And we would really have no recourse, because without cash in a cashless society, if they turn off your wallet, you end up dead on the streets.
And I want to keep it open. And we did a great job. I should get shut down. Wait a minute, Joe. Let me shut you down for a second, Joe, just for 1 second. He wants to shut down the country. We just went through it. We had to, because we didn't know anything about the disease. Now we found.
You don't need to shut down the country. You inform the public and you help the public take proper precautions.
Very, very vulnerable.
We have a constitution. Apparently, President Trump has not read it, but I'd be more than willing to send him a copy. if he actually would read it. I don't think he would. And if he did intend to read it, it's almost like he intends to undermine the Constitution. He's done everything he can, say one thing and do another. He does everything he can to undermine his oath of office and undermine the United States of America so that he can make more money and pay $750 or less in taxes.
President Trump, you have begun to increasingly question the effectiveness of masks as a disease preventer. And in fact, recently you have cited the issue of waiters touching their masks and touching plates. Are you questioning
No, I think
the efficacy of
you have to understand, if you look, I mean, I have a mask right here.
Again, right now, we have to trust everything that the government tells us, the CDC. We're not getting very much independent confirmation from universities and independent doctors. And therefore, and as a result of that, we've gotten conflicting reports from all over the place. And in that situation, we don't know what to trust. And there's no one to blame other than the president for that, because again, he's in charge. He's the one that's held accountable, and he's failed the American people.
Well, masks make a big difference. His own head of the CDC said if we just wore masks between now, if everybody wore masks and social distance between now and January, we'd probably save up to 100,000 lives. It matters.
And they've also said the opposite. They've also said,
no
Anybody can figure out that wearing a mask helps. It does help, regardless of what report you want to read from the wacko sources that are out there showing that it doesn't. The medical community would not have been wearing masks for how many decades if they didn't work to some degree. Nothing is going to be 100% effective, but there are some things that we can do that will be effective. And wearing a mask where something is airborne like the flu can be helpful.
Much smaller events with
nobody will show up.
people with masks.
Not for you, Mr. President. You're damn right.
In any case, why you holding the big rallies? Why you not? You goes first, sir.
Because people want to hear what I have to say. I mean,
Are you not
done a
worried
great
about
job
the
as a president, and I'll have 35,000 people show up at airports. We use airports.
Are you not worried about
We have a lot of people. Well, so far, we have.
We should give credit where credit is due. The president likes to sell machismo. That's what he does. He is a very charismatic individual. And if he actually understood the Constitution and intended on upholding it, he might have done some good work. But the fact of the matter is, he lies through his teeth, says one thing and does another, and has systematically dismantled the First Amendment, is obstructed justice, has profited off of the government. He is not a friend. He's not a friend of the American people, and therefore, and we cannot trust anything he says. And if you cannot trust your leader, then we're really in big trouble.
He's not worried about the people out there breathing in one. We've had no negative effect. We've had no negative effect. And we've had 40,000 people at these rallies.
Just quickly finish up because I want to move on to our next.
Yes, I would. He's been totally irresponsible the way in which he has handled the social distancing and people wearing masks, basically encouraging them not to. All right, then he's a fool on this.
If you could get the crowds, you would have done the same thing, but you can't. Nobody can.
Gentlemen, can we move on to the economy? Gentlemen, can we move on to the economy?
Again,
The economy
he's a
is fair to
narcissist.
say recovering faster than expected from the shutdown. In the second quarter, the unemployment rate fell to 8.4% last month.
Government
The
reported
Federal
unemployment
Reserve
rate.
says the hit to growth, which is going to be there, is not going to be nearly as big as they had expected. President Trump, you say we are in a V-shaped recovery. Vice President Biden, you say it's more of a K-shape. What difference does that mean to the American people in terms of the economy?
It means that the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, and that's the way it's been since 1913, and that's the way it's going to continue to be until we end the Fed and go green instead with the credit union. We need to be able to split the profits with the people and not the banks.
He didn't think we should close it down, and he was wrong. And again, 2 million people would be dead now instead of still 204,000 people is too much. One person is too much. Should have never happened from China. But what happened is we closed it down, and now we're reopening, and we're doing record business. We had 10.
We're not doing record business.
In a 4-month period that put back into the workforce. That's a record the likes of which nobody's ever seen before. And he wants to close down he will shut it down again. He will destroy this country. You know, a lot of people between drugs and alcohol and depression.
The president, Newspack calling the kettle black. He wants to talk about destroying the country. That's his objective.
Shutdowns. And I'm telling you, it's because they don't want to open it. One of them came out last week. You saw that. Oh, we're going to open up on November 9th. Why November 9th? Because it's after the election. They think they're hurting us by keeping them closed. They're hurting people. People know what to do. They can social distance. They can wash their hands. They can wear masks. They can do whatever they want. But
He's right about that. We need to empower individuals. We need to empower local communities to make good local decisions.
Pennsylvania, Michigan, and a couple of others. You got to open these states up. It's not fair. You're talking about almost it's like being in prison. And you look at what's going on with divorce. Look at what's going on with alcoholism and drugs. It's a very, very sad thing. And he'll close down the whole country. This guy will close down the whole country and destroy our country. Our country is coming back incredibly
Again,
well.
two-party system, two-party duopoly. We've got a lesser of two evils here. The choice between one guy whose mission statement is to destroy liberty in America, and that's President Trump, against a vice president who has partnered in creating the USA Patriot Act and has enabled and empowered a person like Trump to rise to power in the first place.
COVID crisis and done very well. Another billionaires have made another $300 billion because of his profligate tax proposal, and he only focused on the market. But you folks at home, you folks living in Scranton and Claymont and all the small towns and working class towns in America, how well are you doing? This guy paid a total of $750 in taxes.
Sir, sir, it's just, I understand. You've agreed to the 2 minutes, so please let him have it.
If I get my time back? The fact is that he has, in fact, worked on this in a way that he's going to be the first president of the United States to leave office having fewer jobs in his administration than when he became president. Fewer jobs than when he became president. First one in American history. Secondly, the people who have lost their jobs are those people who have been on the front lines, those people who have been saving our lives, those people who have been out there dying, people who have been putting themselves in a way to make sure that we could all try to make it. And the idea that he is insisting that we go forward and open when you have almost half the states in America with a significant increase in COVID deaths and COVID cases in the United States of America. And he wants to open it up more. Why does he want to open it up? Why doesn't he take care of the American? You can't fix the economy until you fix the COVID crisis. And he has no.
The only way to fix the COVID crisis is to open source and declassify, empower the people, empower the universities to conduct the research, and make sure that individuals are empowered with individual action to take care of themselves, and that we align our monetary policy and our fiscal policy with liberty. And just to be clear, liberty is clean air, liberty is fresh water, liberty is healthy organic food, liberty is money that retains value over time, and a constitution that is applied evenly to all people at all times by default and without exception.
American people, so we can't open safe.
Your time is up, sir. Well, you're going to get to.
I have to respond to that.
But you both have 2 minutes, sir.
Excuse me, he made a statement.
So did you.
People want their schools. No, people want their schools.
Victim Trump. He's always playing the victim. He likes to act like the big tough guy. But have you noticed how he's always playing the victim? There's no other. That's the only way that he's able to say, it's constantly playing this outsider role when he's the ultimate insider. Victim Trump. You cannot practice victimhood from the presidency of the United States.
It was me, and I'm very happy to do it. And the people of Ohio are very proud of me. And
we'd be happy to. You know what? If he wants to go back on television and go back to being a talk show host, we'd be happy. We'd even set him up with the opportunity. But enough is enough with him in the Oval Office.
The year you were elected president, and 2017, your first year as president, that you paid $750 a year in federal income tax each of those years. I know that you pay a lot of other taxes, but I'm asking you the specific question. Is it true that you paid $750 in federal income taxes each of those 2 years?
I paid millions of dollars in taxes.
Prove it.
Millions of dollars of income tax.
Prove it.
And let me just tell you, There was a story in one of the papers that I paid $38 million.
It's been 4 years. He has not shown us his tax returns. He doesn't intend to do so. And the American public must know. We must know whose pocket our elected officials are in. And the president, whose pocket is he in? He's cozying up to dictators around the world. Is it because they're paying him and they're putting money in his pockets, maybe in a private Swiss bank account? I don't know, but I'll make you a promise. As your president, I will open source my bank account. I will ensure that there's a document that is signed by everybody that works with me and works with us, so that any Swiss bank account or any other bank account that is in secret, if it's ever found, then they forfeit those assets and it goes directly to our credit union that is held equally by the people of the United States. There will be no secrecy in the McHugh administration because we, the people, demand transparency and accountability.
I was a private business people. Like every other private person, unless they're stupid, they go through the laws, and that's what it is. He passed a tax bill that gave us all these privileges for depreciation and for tax credits. We built
I'm embarrassed for the president right now, and he should be embarrassed for himself. Constantly finger pointing at somebody else and failing to take accountability for your own actions, failing to stand on your own record, pointing a finger at somebody else. I mean, this is just that's not what leadership is, folks. Leadership is accepting responsibility, and that is not what we see here. As a matter of fact, we know that the president has said, quote, "I accept no responsibility."
Is because of him he says he's smart because he can take advantage of the tax code. And he does take advantage of the tax code. That's why I'm going to eliminate the Trump tax cuts. And we're going to eliminate those tax cuts and make sure that we invest in the people who, in fact.
The real issue here with taxes is that there are far too many loopholes that are bought and paid for by the people who can afford it. And if we want to, now, there are some people out there that would like to get rid of the IRS completely. In a perfect world, absolutely. But you know what? It's not a perfect world. There are a lot of people that are making trillions or billions and billions, and a lot of people that are making next to nothing. And so what we really need is to take a step in the right direction. And that is, again, to turn the bank into a credit union and to enable a flat tax that gets rid of all the deductions. And it's only 11% tax for people earning less than 75K and 33% for the people earning over 75K. And it's, phased in, so your 75,000 and first dollars, the first dollar tax at 33%. It's called the progressive flat tax, and it works for the American people. And the vast majority of people earning $100,000, $120,000, $150,000 today would pay less under that bill, under that plan, than what we're currently paying, while the people who are earning all the money at the top would pay much more because they pay next to nothing, just like the president.
My economic plan would create 7 million more jobs than his in 4 years, number one. And number two, it would create an additional $1 trillion in economic growth, because it would be about buying American. That we're going to make this federal government spend $600 billion a year on everything from ships to steel to buildings and the like. And under my proposal, we're going to make sure that every penny of that has to be made by a company.
But respectfully, so I'm talking about taxes, not spending.
Well, by the way, I'm going to eliminate a significant number of the tax. I'm going to make the corporate tax 28%. It shouldn't be 21%. You have 91 companies, in the Fortune 500, who don't pay a single penny in tax, making billions of dollars.
When the tax code is so complicated that the American people and the candidates running for office don't know their own tax policy, we've got a problem. We need to move to a progressive flat tax where the American people earning up to 75K pay only 11%, and the people earning over 75K pay 33% on every dollar earned over 75K. That's simple. That's easy to understand. It's clear and it's objective. It's in compliance with the void for vagueness doctrine, which should become an amendment.
More jobs were created, 1.5 million more jobs than in the first 3 years of your presidency.
They had the slowest recovery economic recovery since 1929. It was the slowest recovery.
Again, the president wants to point fingers at the economic recovery from the Great Recession in 2008. I'm from Detroit, and the market fell out here. Again, it was engineered by the Federal Reserve. They ended up buying all sorts of foreclosed properties after people were booted. And now we have a lower home ownership rate and higher rentership than we've had in decades. And that is because the bank controls everything and we, the people, control nothing. Neither of these people, neither of these candidates, the president nor the vice president, is talking about ending the Fed and going green instead. Neither of them is talking about repealing the CIA Act of 1947, which gives the CIA and all the people who work for it complete blanket immunity from being held accountable with by the American people. Those are the two first steps that we need to restore liberty in America. Once we do that and we truly free the market and we invest into clean, green, renewable, organic type of business opportunities that are locally controlled and operated, that's when you're really going to see the market be much more widely held, and the families of America are going to be a lot healthier, a lot wealthier, and much, much freer.
Manufacturing. I brought back 700,000 jobs. They brought back nothing. They gave up on manufacturing. Standard fare.
If I had my mask at this is it's in the car, but if I had it on me, it is an American flag, but it's like a tube sort of thing, like a scarf. I would offer it to the president because it looks like he's about to cry. He's very frustrated up there right now. He's trying to prove that he actually has done something. For someone who supposedly believes in liberty, he really has taken no actions in favor of liberty and has undermined it in every manner since then. And if we elect him again, you Second Amendment people, watch out because he's coming for our guns too.
The art of the deal. China's perfected the art of this deal. We have a higher deficit with China now than we did before. We have the highest trade deficit.
China ate your lunch. China ate your lunch, Joe.
Has anyone read The Art of the Deal? I've read the book, The Art of the Deal. And you know what? It's one of those books that I would probably read to my 8-year-old nephew because it's written at an 8-year-old reading level. The problem is that I wouldn't want to have my 8-year-old nephew learn the art of the deal from the president because all he does is think about himself instead of actually teaching the American people how to start businesses, which is what we really ought to be doing. We ought to have a president who understands entrepreneurship, who understands data, has integrity and accountability, and will lead from the front for the American people and for liberty. And the president will not do that.
It is not true.
Oh, really? Mr. President, it's an open discussion, please. It's a fact. Well, you have raised an issue. Let the Vice President answer.
Discredit.
Did Burroughs pay her $183,000 a month with no experience in energy?
Mr. President,
My son did nothing wrong.
I think he did.
Mr. President.
So the president is hitting on Hunter Biden, and rightfully so. We need accountability through and through. This is not a Republican or Democratic issue. This is, are you American or are you opposed to the American experiment? And as long as you oppose transparency and accountability as an elected official, then we've got a problem. Now, personally, I don't know what Hunter Biden did, but it sounds like he may have made a lot of money simply by being Hunter Biden, just like Ivanka made a lot of money and Jared made a lot of money because they're Ivanka and Jared. You can't really point the finger on one side if you're not willing to take it yourself. They're both guilty.
You've already fired most of them because they did a good job.
Some people don't.
Well, but here's the.
You get the final word.
Well, it's hard to get any word in with this clown. Excuse me.
Hey, let me just tell you.
No. Mr. President.
$3.5 million.
That is simply.
Why did he deserve $3.5 million from Moscow?
Look, here's the deal. We want to talk about families and ethics. I don't want to do that. I mean, his family we could talk about all night. His family's
My family.
I mean, Trump, the president is trying to run the government like a small business in which he gets to make decisions without the individual, without the Constitution being involved. He's putting, his family members in charge of things. This is like something out of the movie Idiocracy. That's not how you want to run a country.
That's what we're talking about.
That's the end of the segment. We're moving on.
It didn't take that.
Vice President,
Can I be honest? It's a very important point. He stood up.
No, the answer to the question is no.
Ukraine.
No, sir.
With $1 billion of
You know what? You're really not true.
You're going to have
True.
Gentlemen.
The only way to prove it is to make sure that if you're in public service, then you open source your accounts and you prove it.
So here's the big point. We have 6 segments. We have ended that segment. We're going to go to the next segment. In that segment, you each are going to have 2 uninterrupted moments. In those 2 uninterrupted minutes, Mr. President, you can say anything you want. I'm going to ask a question about race, but if you want to answer about something else, go ahead. But I think that the country would be better served if we allowed both people to speak with fewer interruptions. I'm appealing to you, sir, to do that.
Well, and him too.
Well, frankly, you've been doing more
Oh,
interrupting.
that's all right, but he does plenty.
Well, less than, sir, less than, no, less than you have. Let's please continue on. The issue of race. Vice President Biden, you say that President Trump's response to the violence in Charlottesville 3 years ago, when he talked about very fine people on both sides, was what directly led you to launch this run for president.
Oh, yeah, sure.
President Trump, you have often said that you believe you have done more for Black Americans than any president, with the possible exception of Abraham Lincoln. My question for the 2 of you is, why should voters trust you rather than your opponent to deal with the race issues facing this country over the next 4
The
years?
reality is that neither candidate has pledged to end qualified immunity. And to do that, you need to repeal the CIA Act of 47. And President Trump is responsible for the violence that's happening in the street, directly and indirectly, because directly as the leader, because what people want, what we want, is the government to be held accountable by ending and repealing qualified immunity and the aspects that are associated with it. And rather than doing that, he's just stoked the fire, inflaming hatred and division, taunting governors, taking credit for their actions. The governors have control of the National Guard, not the president. And if you really were invested in restoring liberty in America for all people, and if you really wanted to help the Black community, you would have ended qualified immunity instead of engaging in a fight. But he dug in his heels, and that is not the way to lead from the front.
Use tear gas on them so you can walk across to a church and hold up a Bible. And then what happened after that? The bishop of that very church said that it was a disgrace. The general who was with him said all he ever wants to do is divide people, not unite people at all. This is a president who has used everything as a dog whistle to try to generate racist hatred, racist division. This is a man who, in fact, you talk about helping African Americans. 1 in 1,000 African Americans has been killed because of the coronavirus. And if he doesn't do something quickly, by the end of the year, 1 in 500 will have been killed. 1 in 500 African Americans. This man is a savior of African Americans. This man cares at all. This man's done virtually nothing. Look,
He really has done virtually nothing. He's done worse than nothing. He's made it worse.
Look at what he did. And what he did has been disastrous for the.
But the vice president, unfortunately, contributed to it by supporting the Patriot Act in 2001, and that is and the '94 crime bill is right. So again, the lesser of 2 evils is totally un-American that we have to make this choice. That's why if you're in Utah or Colorado, I impress upon you, couldn't impress upon you more. Vote McHugh. And when we take the state, we will be one of 3 candidates that the Congress can choose from for the next president of the United States. Trump, Biden, or McHugh. And only McHugh, myself, will serve you, the people.
So what you did, you called them super predators, and you've called them worse than that. Because you look back at your testimony over the years, you've called them a lot worse than that. As far as the church is concerned, and as far as the generals are concerned, we just got the support of 250 military leaders and generals. Total support. Law enforcement, almost every law enforcement group in the United States. I have Florida, I have Texas, I have Ohio, I have every.
That's more of an implication of their guilt than anything else. It sounds if they wouldn't have anything to hide, they would be in favor. The police would also be in favor of transparency and accountability. We need a police force, a peacekeeping force that is willingly held to transparency and accountability. And if they are not, then we can't trust them to serve and protect the public either.
They heard we were coming in the following day, and they put up their hands, and we got back Seattle. Minneapolis, we got it back, Joe, because we believe
The president hasn't done anything to get anything back. It's all been the action by the mayors and the governors of their states, because they're the ones that are responsible for their local police department and the National Guard. The president is not responsible for the National Guard. In fact, the president has sent in U.S. Marshals and assassinated the person who killed Jay Danielson, the guy whose name Reynolds or something like that. And if you look into it, it looks very similar to the fact that Lee Harvey Oswald was assassinated. Destroy the evidence. That's what the U.S. Marshals did on behalf of the president.
You said it raises the question, quote, whether justice could be equally applied in America. Do you believe that there is a separate but unequal system of justice for blacks in this country?
Yes, there's systemic injustice in this country, in education and work and in law enforcement and the way in which it's enforced. But look, the vast majority of police officers are good, decent, honorable men and women. They risk their lives every day to take care of us. But there are some bad apples. And when they occur, when they find them, they have to be sorted out. They have to be held accountable. They have to be held accountable. And what I'm going to do as President of the United States is call together an entire group of people at the White House, well, everything from the civil rights groups to the police officers to the police chiefs, and we're going to work this out.
Not good enough. Not good enough. What needs to be done is we need to repeal the CIA Act and reform it so that the intelligence is coming not from secrecy but from transparency. And with transparency, we're able to hold people accountable. And anyone who is serving the public really ought not to have anything to fear, because if you truly are a public servant, then you are going to be revered and honored by the public, not taken into account by the public. And you only have something to fear if you are not being, if you're not honoring your oath to serve and protect the people.
I'd like to continue with the issue of race. I promise we're going to get to the issue of law and order in a moment. This month, your administration directed federal agencies to end racial sensitivity training that addresses white privilege or critical race theory. Why did you decide to do that, to end racial sensitivity training? And do you believe that there is...
I'm going to let him hang himself on this one.
I ended it because it's racist. I ended it because a lot of people were complaining that they were asked to do things that were absolutely insane, that it was a radical revolution that was taking place in our military, in our schools, all over the place, and you know it, and so does everybody else.
The only thing that's truly racist is the application on behalf of our government for the last 100 years of the laws of the Constitution of the Bill of Rights and the Constitution of the United States, where the American people no longer have the right to be secure in our home, in our person, in our communications, as is premised by our Fourth Amendment. Then you're going to end up having people being pulled over on the streets and shot in their houses. Even though we have a right to self-defense, we also have a Fifth Amendment right to due process, which means that we ought to have a warrant if the government thinks that we've done something wrong. We have a Third Amendment right to privacy, which means that the government has no right to monitor our communications and to invade our home and to pull us over on suspicion and conduct searches of our vehicle. And yet these things happen every day because the U.S. government has completely abdicated full responsibility for adhering to our Constitution. And it's not just been President Trump. It's been a two-party hijacking of the American people. And in order to restore liberty in America, we need to end the Fed and go green instead and repeal that USA Patriot Act and the CIA Act in order to ensure that we have transparency and accountability in our government. Neither one of them are pledging to do anything remotely close to that. All they want to do is keep the system set up right the way it is right now, which is oppressive and in full violation of the Constitution.
There's nothing we cannot do if we do it together. We can take this on and we can defeat racism.
President Trump, sir.
During the Obama-Biden administration, there was tremendous division. There was hatred. You look at
there was division, but it wasn't stoked by the president himself. There was division mostly stoked by the gutted old party, formerly grand and now gutted old party, who is intent on obstructing justice an intent on obstructing anything that the president did at the time. And I think it might be even fair to say that they were doing so simply potentially because he was black.
Law and order with justice, where people get treated fairly. And the fact of the matter is, violent crime was down 17%, 50%.
The president wants to talk about law and order. Law and order was described originally by Thomas Jefferson, and he described rightful liberty as unobstructed action, drawn within limits drawn around us by the equal rights of others. And he does not add within limits of the law, because law is often the tyrant's will and always so when it violates the rights of the individual. So if we are to look back at what Thomas Jefferson said, it's very clear that today's version of law and order is a violation of our constitutional rights and the very definition of tyranny.
I think it's a party issue. You can bring in a couple of examples, but if you look at Chicago, what's going on in Chicago, where 53 people were shot and 8 died shot. If you look at New York, where it's going up like nobody's ever seen anything, the numbers are going up 100, 150, 200%. Crime. It's crazy what's going on. And he doesn't want to say law.
Man, I really wish I was on that stage right now.
Radical left supporters, and once he does that, it's over with. But if he ever got to run this country and they ran it the way he would want to run it, our suburbs would be gone. By the way, our suburbs would be gone.
If we ran the country with transparency and accountability, we would have the greatest wealth-producing machine in the history of the world, much more so than anything we've ever experienced. We would have clean air, fresh water, healthy organic food, money that retain value over time, and a constitution that applies evenly to all people at all times by default and without exception. That's what we would have if we decided to repeal the Patriot Act, repeal the CIA Act, and repeal the Federal Reserve Act of 1913 and replace it with a credit union that's clean, green, citizen-owned, and fully transparent.
They're being burned out because his refusal to do anything. That's why the suburbs are in trouble.
I do want to talk about this issue of law and order, though. And in the joint recommendation that came from the Biden-Bernie Sanders task force, you talked about, quote, reimagining policing. First of all, what does reimagining policing mean, and do you support?
It means,
Let me, if I might finish the question. What does reimagining policing mean, and do you support the Black Lives Matter call for community control of policing?
look.
Yes, absolutely. Who else is the police supposed to serve but the community? Serve and protect, right? So absolutely, we need to have full accountability and transparency at all levels of government, and that's why the police chiefs are elected, right? So of course we should have that kind of level of accountability. And the idea that the phrase Black Lives Matter is hijacked, and that people think that it's about anything other than the fact that Black lives matter and that they haven't mattered under our Constitution and in America since the founding of our nation, and that it's what we have done is that we have violated our Constitution, we have violated the oath to the American people, and that we need to adhere to the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, because when you make exceptions for one group, you start making exceptions for them all. If you think that it's not right that Black people ought to have equal rights in America, and you think that you're going to be able to keep your guns, you're sadly mistaken. The guns are next to go, because you know why? The USA Patriot Act says that anybody who's deemed a terrorist in America can be spied upon, and the Republicans and the Democrats together will eventually say that if you are deemed a terrorist, just like you are currently with the felon, you're not going to be able to have your guns. If you take drugs, then you're not going to be able to have your guns. And next thing you know, they're going to come after you, and they're going to take your guns too. So if you really want your Second Amendment right, you might want to get on board with equal rights for all people.
Earlier tonight, you said that you are the Democratic Party right now. Have you ever called the Democratic mayor of Portland or the Democratic governor of Oregon and said, hey, you got to stop this, bring in the National Guard, do whatever it takes, but you stop the days and months of violence in Portland?
I don't hold public office now. I am a former vice president. I've made it clear. I've made it clear in my public statements.
I would have loved to call these people, but you know what? It seems like
Excuse me, sir.
I'm broadcasting tonight from a computer that's not my own. It's a borrowed computer. And the reason why is because for the last 8 years, I've been a target of the government. And it's not just me, but it's also the people who are the black people in particular, women, people in the lower rungs of the income scale, anybody who's not on board with this fascist hijacking of America. Edward Snowden, Julian Assange, Manning, these are all people that have been targeted, and America will do anything they can to keep people down in order to maintain control. It's not America that's doing it. It's the Federal Reserve in particular, and whoever is behind that owns the Fed and owns our government. And we need to end the Fed and go green instead with the credit union in order to restore our ownership of our money, because whoever has the money makes the rules. And that is what's really ultimately important here.
Going in and talking to people and saying, let's get everybody together, figure out how to deal with this. What's he do? He just pours gasoline in the fire constantly and every single solitary.
Okay, and to end this, button up this segment, I'm going to give you a minute to answer, sir. You have repeatedly criticized.
To answer his
No, you have repeatedly. No, you've been talking.
I made a statement.
I'm asking you.
I would love to end it. I would love to end it.
You know, if you want to switch seats.
Listen, this president, unbelievable, interrupting the moderator. He would have already been in his comment, making his comments, if you had just let the moderator say what he had to say. The fact of the matter is that the president respects nobody but himself. And that's really what we're dealing with here. What he just showed, the disrespect to the moderator, is the same level of disrespect that he shows to the American people and to the Constitution, which he has never read.
To the violence in a number of these cities, as we saw in Kenosha and as we've seen in Portland. Are you prepared to specifically?
I would say almost everything I see is from the left wing, not from the right
So
wing.
what do you?
That's why he sent in the U.S. Marshals to assassinate the supposed Black Lives Matter guy who killed the MAGA supporter. I'm sorry. This is JFK, RFK all over again. The president sent in the U.S. Marshals to assassinate to basically destroy the evidence. And that's the reason why Michael Rhino, or whatever his name was, said, I had no choice. They were going to kill my black friend, is what he added in the follow-up. But if you watch the video of the actual hit on Jay Danielson, you will see there was no black friend that he was defending. It was a hit job. This supposed Antifa person who has a black fist tattooed on his neck, as if anyone does that. There is no organization of Antifa, and if there is, it's funded by the people who are attempting to dismantle our government. It's funded by the president and his cronies.
I'm going to ask a question. When the president seeks a second term, it is generally a referendum on his record. But Vice President Biden, you like to quote one of your dad's sayings, which is, don't compare me to the almighty, compare me to the alternative. And in this case, sir, you are the alternative. Looking at your records, I'm going to ask each of you, why should voters elect you president over your opponent in this segment? President Trump, you go first, 2 minutes.
Because there has never been an administration or president who has done more than I've done.
To obstruct the American people, destroy the Constitution, and ensure that we never again see liberty in America. Happy to finish your sentence for you, Mr. President. That's the only thing that you've actually done for the American people, is taken away our liberty in an unprecedented manner.
There's never been an administration that's done what I've done. The greatest, before COVID came in, the greatest economy in history, lowest unemployment.
Gaslit the American people, say one thing and do another, turn the presidency and the country into a disgrace and a laughingstock, because the president of the United States doesn't have respect for himself, the people, or the office.
Rebuilding of the military, including Space Force and all.
Military was not needed to be rebuilt. We all had a highly capable military under President Obama. The president did nothing to supposedly rebuild the military.
He was a mess. And we now got a 91% approval rating at the VA, our vets. We take care of our vets. But we've rebuilt our military. The job that we've done, and I'll tell you some people say
He's talking to different people than I'm talking to, that's for sure.
I'll have approximately 300 federal judges and Court of Appeals judges, 300, and hopefully 3 great Supreme Court justices. That is a record, the likes of which very few people.
Potentially a coup if none of them are able to garner a 3/5 Senate majority and in line with over 2 centuries of precedent. That's what it is. It's not something to brag about. He's actually bragging about the overthrow of our liberty.
And if I were a member of his party, because they have a little different philosophy, I'd say if you left.
I'm not part of any party. I'm part of the Party of Liberty, which is the American Party.
You can't be a good vice president, but I want to thank you because it gives us it'll probably be above that number by the end of this term. 300 judges, it's a record.
Looking at both your records, why should voters elect you president as opposed to President Trump? You have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Under this president, we become weaker, sicker, poorer, more divided, and more violent. When I was vice president, we inherited a recession. I was asked to fix it. I did. We left him a booming economy, and he caused a recession. With regard to being weaker, the fact is that I've gone head to head with Putin and made it.
I'm going to go ahead, since we're not talking about Putin, I'm going to go ahead and start my 2 minutes right now. With your support as president, we will restore liberty in America. We will renew the promise of America for the American people. We will do so by ending the Fed and going green instead with a credit union that is clean, green, citizen-owned, and fully transparent so that we can get off of oil, out of oil wars, out of drug wars, and invest in renewables and organics in the American people, splitting the profits again with the people and not with the bankers. We will end qualified immunity by repealing the CIA Act of 1947. That is the only way to do it. You cannot do it from the bench, because if you do it from the bench and they depart from precedent, by departing from precedent, you create an activist bench that is unaccountable to anybody, including previous rulings, and that is a problem. Beyond that, it's about passing. We need to pass a void for vagueness amendment to ensure that the government is accountable to the American people. And all laws on the books are clear, objective, and easily understood by the average American. And in doing so, we will be able to repeal probably the vast majority of laws, because the reality here is that anything that does not involve a victim is not a crime. That includes drug laws, that includes gun laws. And that will protect the American people from unlawful search and seizure, unlawful obstruction, entrapment, and interference by the government. And it will restore liberty and accountability through trust and transparency in America by ensuring that the people are guardians, both in the intel as well as in the front lines, and both the military and the police, well, not the military, but the police especially, are beholden to their oath to serve and protect, which we can only enforce and be sure of if their actions are fully transparent to the American people.
He my son, and he didn't have my son, like a lot of people.
I can promise you that we will not have someone pointing fingers at other people and refusing to take accountability. As a Marine, I'm accountable and responsible for my actions as a leader. I'm fighting for freedom as an American. I'm fighting for freedom, responsible for my actions, and committed to the principles which made our country free. Those principles are contained right here in the Constitution. Neither candidate up there is fully committed to the Constitution, but we will be, with your support, in Colorado and Utah.
Mitt Romney on that committee said they wouldn't want taxpayers' money that reporters did for political reasons.
You know, I'd like to talk about climate change.
So would I.
Okay.
That's a good response for the vice president.
Raging now. They have burned millions of acres. They have displaced hundreds of thousands of people. When state officials there blame the fires on climate change, Mr. President, you said, I don't think the science knows. Over your 4 years, you have pulled the U.S. out of the Paris Climate Accord. You have rolled back a number of Obama environmental records. What do you believe about the science of climate change, and what will you do in the next 4 years to confront it?
I want crystal clean water and air. I want beautiful clean air. We have now the lowest carbon. If you look at our numbers right now, we are doing phenomenally. But I haven't destroyed our businesses. Our businesses aren't put out of commission. If you look at the Paris Accord,
I'm not even sure that
and people are actually very happy about what's going on.
He's dodging the question. He doesn't want to talk about why he said it's going to get cooler, but I'll answer it for him since he can't find his way out of the paper bag. He said that that things are going to get cooler. And the reason why he said that is because we're going into a solar minimum. And when in a solar minimum, you have less solar activity, which tends to result in cooler temperatures on Earth. Now, so he actually was right when he said that. I would argue that the reason why, now, whether or not that actually happens remains to be seen, because we've been pumping so much oil and gas into the air into the forms of CO2, presumably to offset that global cooling that would happen as a result of the solar minimum. Again, the American people, we the people, we're not dumb people. We are very smart, intelligent people. And when presented with good information, we make good decisions. We the people deserve to know what's going on so that we can be involved in the supervisory process and hold our government officials accountable. If we are going into a cooling period, it would be really good to know if what we are attempting to do is to offset that by pumping CO2 into the atmosphere. And that may or may not be the best approach, because you know what? We're poisoning our water. We're poisoning our air. People are getting asthma now for living in the inner city. And the placement of fossil fuel production, power production facilities is predominantly in Black and brown, tend to be poorer communities that have virtually no representation in American government. That is wrong, and it's completely unnecessary, and it's an outdated approach. China, if we do not jump into the 21st century with renewables and organics, China is going to walk all over us. And following President Trump's yesteryear approach of technology using steel walls and gas, it's not going to get the job done.
Because what's happening is the car is much less expensive and it's a much safer car. And you're talking about a tiny difference. And then what would happen, because of the cost of the car, you would have at least double and triple the number of cars purchased. We have the old slugs out there that are 10, 12 years old.
He just talks in circles, and he never uses any facts to back up anything he's saying.
Take a lot of cars off the market because people will be able to afford a car. Now, and by the way, we're going to see how that turns out.
When you empower the entrepreneurs with good information to solve social problems, we end up with more jobs, more wealth, and a cleaner, freer America. It's real simple. Expose the truth to the public, and trust the public with the truth, and empower the public with the truth, and empower entrepreneurs with the truth. And with the truth, we will do more for the American people and the people around the world than any other way. We simply cannot trust a government that is unaccountable to the people.
Ending the use of fossil fuels to generate electricity by 2035 and zero net emission of greenhouse gases by 2050. The president says a lot of these things would tank the economy and cost millions of jobs.
He's absolutely wrong.
Yes, he is wrong.
Two, if in fact, when during our administration, the Recovery Act, I was in charge, able to bring down the cost of renewable energy to cheaper than or as cheap as coal and gas and oil.
So again, we're talking about a centralized approach, a government-sponsored approach, what we really need to do. But when we end the Fed and go green instead with the credit union, we will be able to divest from oil and gas and invest into renewables and organics and brought to market by entrepreneurs. Now, as the founder of Earth Loans, I attempted to get a company that created loans and investments for a healthy planet to the market, to the American people, and we were going to specialize in geothermal heating and cooling. Carbon-free heating and cooling for the American people. And instead of investing in the business, instead of investing in clean, green jobs for America, our fascist government decided to do everything they could for preventing that from getting to the market because they're invested in pollution, not solutions. Now, furthermore, if you live in Pennsylvania and you're concerned about fracking, the people that are in the drilling business, primarily fracking is drilling. And the good news is that geothermal heating and cooling is heavily reliant on drilling, which means that you have a very bright future in geothermal heating and cooling, and we will be able to facilitate the transition to that. You would end up owning your own shops. You would end up doing more business. Imagine instead of drilling a couple of wells that are going to service the utilities that provide the gas. You're providing service for a very small market. Now imagine drilling holes for the vast majority of houses and businesses that are out there because we can provide clean, carbon-free, green heating and cooling to the American public through geothermal instead of through fossil fuels. Now, there's more opportunity. You'll make more money in geothermal than you will in fracking.
Environmental interests and economic interests, and he's drawn his line.
Well, he hadn't drawn a line. He still, for example, makes sure that he wants to make sure that methane's not a problem. You can now emit more methane without it being a problem. Methane. This is a guy who
Again,
says
the
that
president is doing anything to serve corporate interests,
this is a guy who
and he's committed to serving corporate interests. He's not in the pocket of the American people. He's in the pocket of the people that are paying for more hotels and more money and more traveling and more consulting fees and more golf. And if that's not the case, then he can show us his tax returns. He can show us his bank accounts. But the fact of the matter is he's not doing that because he is in the pocket of corporate America. And not necessarily, corporate America. It could also be corporate Russia, corporate China. It could be corporate who knows where, corporate, Rothschilds of Europe. He's definitely not in the pocket of the American people. And he's choking off the economy as well.
Upgrading 4 million buildings, weatherizing 2 million homes over 4 years, building 1.5 million energy efficient homes.
This is the opportunity. It's an enormous opportunity.
The president is saying, I think some people who support the president would say that sounds like it's going to cost a lot of money and hurt the economy.
what it's going to do is going to create thousands and millions of jobs, good paid jobs.
It will create lots of jobs if it's paid for through taxes, which I don't know if the Democratic plan might do that. The Republicans have no plan for it. Our plan, the people's plan, is to do it through monetary policy, which means that we do effectively what I wanted to do as the founder of Earth Loans, and we turned that into a credit union in order to offer low-cost interest loans to the American people to convert their homes from polluting fossil-based homes and businesses to fossil-free, pollution-free homes and businesses at very low cost. And after the loans are paid off, guess what? You own your utility, which means you no longer are beholden to the corporate interests that are owned and operated by the Federal Reserve. That is what liberty looks like.
Entire sections and counties in Iowa. That didn't happen before. They're because of global warming. We make up 15% of the world's problem. We, in fact, but the rest of the world, we got to get them to come along. That's why we have to get back in.
What we really need to do here is to not pollute. That's the bottom line. Not pollute, trust nature, and just do the right thing. And when we do that, then we'll be okay. When we don't do that, we end up pointing fingers at the other guy, saying it's not my fault, it's not everyone else's fault. And then the American people are confused instead of knowing the truth. And the truth can only be known through complete and total transparency and objectivity in the law and in the processes and procedures executed on behalf of our law enforcement agencies.
He said, stupid values. I would never say that.
Play it.
Go ahead. The Vice President answered his final question.
The final question is, I can't remember which of all was ranting.
I'm having a little trouble myself, but and about the economy and about this question of what it's going to cost.
The economy.
I mean, the Green New Deal and the idea of
Listen, the transition to a clean, green, free America will run in the trillions of dollars. The good news is that when we have a credit union, we, the people, own that. As long as it's owned by the bank, it's just going to be indebtedness directly to the bank through Congress, which we have to pay back with taxes. Once we own our own bank, then we own the assets, and every American will earn a dividend from the profits of that collectively. And that is what freedom looks like. It's money that holds value over time because it's backed by nature. It's money that helps support a clean, green, and free America that eliminates pollutions and invests in solutions instead. That's what's possible. And that's what's not being done under the Federal Reserve Bank and the two-party duopoly of the Republicans and Democrats.
Because it'll not only be to election day, but also counting some ballots, mail-in ballots after election day. What are you prepared to do to reassure the American people that the next president will be the legitimate winner of this election. In this final segment, Mr. Vice President, you go first.
Prepared to let people vote. You should go to iwillvote.com. Decide how they're going to vote, when they're going to vote, and what means by which they're going to vote. His own Homeland Security Director and as well as the FBI Director says there is no evidence at all that mail-in ballots are a source of being manipulated and cheating. They said that. The fact is that there are going to be millions of people because of COVID that are going to be voting.
Fact is that it's not just mail-in ballots, but actual ballots too. There are problems with all sorts of election issues and different systems. And what we really ought to do is transition to blockchain technology, vote on the blockchain so that everybody has a receipt of our own vote, that it's verifiable on the blockchain, that it can't be changed, it's fully transparent, and we have instantaneous results. Instead, we've got to trust the poll operators. We've got to trust that people are doing things right. And we may have to wait weeks. And even after all that, we still may see a repeat of 2000 in which one party stole it from the other. And that's not the way it needs to be. We need to end the Fed, go green instead. We need to adopt a void for vagueness amendment, overturn Citizens United. I would preferably like to go to a democracy dollars-based system where the American people actually have the money to put directly into their candidates, and so that we can get off of corporate-sponsored elections. That would be much better for America.
It's going to be all over. He's going to go. He can't stay in power. It won't happen. It won't happen. So vote. Just make sure you understand you have it in your control to determine what this country's going to look like the next 4 years. Is it going to change? You get 4 more years of these lies.
That's true.
2 minutes.
So when I listened to Joe talking about a transition, there's been no transition from when I won. I won that election. And if you look at crooked Hillary Clinton, if you look at all of the different people, there was no transition because they came after me trying to do a coup. They came after me spying on my campaign. They started from the day I won and even before I won. From the day
This is the president again attempting to deflect from the fact that he has been routinely claiming that he wants not 4 more years, but 12 more years. He wants to be the longest serving president. He wants to top FDR. In order to do that, you'd have to get rid of a constitutional amendment. But you know what? That's fine with the president because he wants to get rid of the Constitution altogether and make sure that he and his family are in charge indefinitely. This is not a government. This is not a president that is interested in liberty for America and for all people. And what we need to do is to vote him out. And we need to make sure that in Utah and Colorado, we vote Joe McHugh to restore liberty in America so that the House will be able to choose between President Trump, Vice President Biden, or a true libertarian, a true person who stands for liberty in America, in Joe McHugh. And I pledge to serve you, we the people of America.
Like you've never seen. The other thing, it's nice on November 3rd, you're watching and you see who won the election. And I think we're going to do well because people are really happy with the job we've done. But you know what? We won't know. We might not know for much.
Not so sure what numbers he's looking at, but it's probably because he can't look at bad numbers and his people are surrounding him with only numbers that look good.
And other places. They're not losing 2%, 1%, which, by the way, is too much. An election can be won or lost with that. They're losing 30 and 40%. It's a fraud, and it's a shame. And can you imagine where they say you have to have your ballot in by November 10th? November 10th. That means that's 7 days after.
No one is saying that. The ballot needs to be postmarked by Election Day. It always has been. It always will be. And as long as the ballot is postmarked by Election Day, it'll be counted. And that's the way it should be. And if the president weren't interfering with the post office, we would make sure that those ballots that were postmarked by the Election Day would actually get to the government, the local government, by the day after Election Day at the latest and counted. But because he's interfering in the post office, we don't have confidence that the ballots are going to reach their destination at all. Again, distract and delay, divide and conquer. That's what this president is doing with he and his fascist cronies in the Federal Reserve.
And are you counting on the Supreme Court, including a Justice Barrett, to settle any dispute?
Yeah, I think I'm counting on them to look at the ballots, definitely. I hope we don't need
Supreme Court doesn't look at ballots. The Supreme Court is there to ensure that all the ballots are counted, and that's it. And we need to count all the ballots.
1% of the ballots for 2016 were invalidated. They take them, we don't like them, we don't like them.
And if all the ballots, if so many ballots are being invalidated, then that means we need to fix the system, the voting system. Again, blockchain would fix that. We, the people, should be able to vote from our smartphones. This is 2020, not 1820. We can get off of paper now.
You either do, Chris, a solicited ballot where you're sending it in, they're sending it back, and you're sending. They have mailmen with lots of it. Did you see what's going on? Take a look at West Virginia, mailmen selling the ballots. They're being sold. They're being dumped in rivers. This is a horrible thing for our country.
The president's just upset that he's not getting a cut of the profits of being sold for of those ballots being sold. I'm sure he wouldn't have a problem with it if you were actually being cut in.
For the last
Disgrace.
decade or more, 5, including 2 Republican states. And you don't have to solicit the ballot. It's sent to you. It's sent to your home. What we're saying is, they're saying is that it has to be a postmark by the time, by election day. If it doesn't get in until the 7th, 8th, 9th, it still should be counted. He's just afraid of counting the votes.
You're wrong. You're wrong.
I want to continue with you on this. Vice President Biden.
Chris, he's so wrong when he makes a statement
No,
like that.
excuse me. Vice President Biden, the biggest problem, in fact, over the years with mail-in voting has not been fraud historically. It has been that sizable number, sometimes hundreds of thousands of ballots are thrown out because they have not been properly filled out, or there is some other irregularity, or they missed the deadline. So the question I have is, are you concerned that the Supreme Court with a Justice Barrett will settle any dispute?
I'm concerned that any court would settle this, because here's the deal. When you
Count the ballots. The court is not there to settle a dispute. Count the
You're supposed
ballots.
to have an affidavit. If you didn't know, you have someone say that this is.
They're not there to decide an
You should be
election.
able to, if in
Count the
fact you
ballots.
can verify that you, before the ballot is thrown out, that's sufficient to be able to count the ballot because someone made a mistake and not dotting the correct I.
Every vote counts. Every American
Testify,
counts.
Say who they voted for, say it's you, that is totally legitimate.
All right.
Excuse me,
No.
when you have 80 million ballots, Senate is swapping the system. You know it.
Not swapping the system if you actually staff the post office correctly.
We can keep talking. In 8 states, election workers are prohibited, currently by law, 8 states, from even beginning to process ballots, even take them out of the envelopes and flatten them until election day. That means that it's likely, because there's going to be a huge increase in mail-in balloting, that we are not going to know on election night who the winner is.
It's important to know that the objective is that the ballots be counted. Therefore, we should be able to process ballots ahead of time.
First for you, sir. Finally, for the vice president, I hope neither of you will interrupt the other. Will you urge your supporters to stay calm during this extended period, not to engage in any civil unrest? And will you pledge tonight that you will not declare victory until the election has been independently certified? President Trump, you
I'm
go first.
urging my supporters to go into the polls and watch very carefully, because that's what has to happen. I am urging them to do it. As you know, today there was a big problem. In Philadelphia, they went in to watch. They're called poll watchers, a very safe, very nice thing. They were thrown out. They weren't allowed to watch. You know why? Because bad things happen in Philadelphia, bad things. And I am urging my people. I hope it's going to be a fair election.
That's not a divide and conquer statement.
I am 100% on board. But if I see tens of thousands of ballots being manipulated, I can't go along with that. And I'll tell you what, from a common sense, I'll tell you what it means. It means you have a fraudulent election. You're sending out 80
Count the ballots.
They're not-
Don't have to worry about fraud. Count the ballots.
People aren't equipped to handle it. Number one. Number two, they cheat. They cheat. Hey, they found ballots in a waste paper basket.
Again, pot calling the kettle black
They all
here.
had the name military ballots. They were military. They all had the name Trump on them.
Vice
I think that's
President
good.
Biden, Vice President Biden, final question for you. Will you
This
urge your
is the president
supporters to stay calm?
filling out ballots on his own, throwing them in the trash can so he can tell his story. Just like he assassinated the guy who killed one of his own people.
Yes, and here's the deal. We count the ballots, as you pointed out. Some of these ballots in some states can't even be opened until election day. And if there's thousands of ballots, it's going to take time to do it. And by the way, our military, They've been voting by ballots since the end of the Civil War, in effect. And that's what's going to happen. Why is it for them somehow not fraudulent? It's the same process. It's honest. No one has established at all that there is fraud related to mail-in ballots, that somehow it's a fraudulent process.
It's already been established. Take a look at Carolyn Maloney's race.
You had an opportunity.
Look at Carolyn
Go
Maloney.
ahead.
They have no idea what
Vice
happened.
President Biden, go ahead.
He has no idea what he's talking about. Here's the deal. The fact is, I will accept it, and he will too. You know why? Because once the winner is declared, after all the ballots are counted, all the votes are counted, that'll be the end of it. That'll be the end of it. And if it's me, in fact, fine. If it's not me, I'll support the outcome. And I'll be a president not just for the Democrats. I'll be president for Democrats and Republicans. And this guy,
I want to thank honest.
I'll be president for the American
Will you
people,
say that's the end of
not
it?
for either party.
Honest ballot count.
We're
And I
gonna
think
leave
he
it
does too.
To be continued as in more debates as we go on. President Trump, Vice President Biden, it's been an interesting hour and a half. I want to thank you both for participating.
Thank you
in
for the
first
opportunity.
debates that you have agreed to engage in. We want to thank Case Western Reserve University. And the
Look forward to participating in another one.
event, the next debate,
And,
presidential debates.
Remember, if you're in Utah and Colorado,
October 7th at the
go to libertystrikesback.com.
in Salt Lake City.
Appreciate your support.
Presidential nominees, Vice President Mike Pence and Senator Kamala Harris, will debate at 9 p.m. Eastern that night. We hope you watch. Until then, thank you and good night.